Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacomb of Brimacomb and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're turning the tables and I'm going to be interviewed by Sharon Bloodworth on veteran lessons for entrepreneurs. This is going to be the first of a couple of interviews that Sharon and I are going to do together. So I hope you enjoy this and I hope you to tune in to the future ones. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors: Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm; Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank; Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency; Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm; and Voyager U, a gateway for creating your own independent work life. All right, to participate today and submit your questions, you must be in YouTube and go into the comments field and put your questions there. We'll do our best to get to them. Also, you can catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform: Apple, Google, Spotify, and many others. All right, today, the guest moderator, Sharon Bloodworth, CEO of White Oaks Wealth Advisors. Welcome, Sharon.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here.
Yep. And if you are in YouTube, Sharon's email is in the comments field there. If not, it's Sharon at White Oaks, plural, wealth.com. Again, Sharon at whiteoakswealth.com. And for anybody who'd like to connect with me, it's easy one, Rick at Brimacomb.com. All right. Before we get started, and again, thank you very much for doing this today, Sharon, and turning the tables. Hopefully you're going to be gentle with me.
I'll try.
Before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. Very interesting background. Growing up that you did travel, where you went to school, but also tell us a little bit about your firm and the type of clients and strategies you use, and then the various other activities that you're involved in.
Oh, perfect. Well, thanks, Rick. I'm very happy to. My hobby is interviewing and moderating panels, but my work is the ownership of 2 private wealth management firms here in Minnesota and in Florida. Proudly, we're one of the largest independent RIA firms wholly owned by a woman in both states. And all of this came from an internship I signed up for almost 30 years ago to learn about American finance in New York City. At that firm, I loved them, they loved me, and the rest is history. For our firm, we have a $2 million investment minimum because we love staying small. So we work with a small number of clients and advocate for them in all areas of their financial life. We really modeled ourselves on the family offices and the endowments for the ultra wealthy. So we offer our clients the same style of investment and lifestyle management. And I like to think of us as the best kept secret in Minnesota. And my background was very varied. My dad worked for an oil company, so I grew up in Africa, Indonesia, Texas, all over. Went to school in France, Italy, the UK, and those countries as well. So I have a very broad, wide background, but I love America. And if it wasn't for the entrepreneurial spirit here, and I would never be where I am and what I'm doing if it wasn't for the States. So I'm very, very grateful for the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that's here. But I would say that, enough about me. We're really here to talk about you. And this interview sprang from a request from you to interview me. And we must know each other over 15 years. And I know that because I met my husband 15 years ago and I met you before that. And when you asked me to be interviewed, I thought, well, that would be fun. But I really think that your audience would much rather hear about you. And I've watched you build Club E from a small roundtable discussion in the Minneapolis Club to really being the central conversation and networking spot for hundreds of Minnesota's entrepreneurs. All this while being a single father of 4 and simultaneously advising companies, sitting on boards. I know that you're connecting funders and investing yourself. So I won't go too much into your history because I know that much of it will come out in our interview today. But you do have 32 years of company analysis entrepreneurship experience. You're probably also the most connected person I know. And in fact, you're an exhausting person to lunch with since everyone wants to interrupt and say hello. But we also know that being an entrepreneur is not a solo endeavor. And the more you can learn to prevent mistakes and the wider your network, really, the faster you can progress. And I know that for many new ventures, you're sought out as an advisor, you're an investor, you're a board member, and have capacity and interest for even more. Um, I thought I would be a bit naughty and ask someone who knows you well for their observations. So I heard back from a little bird. Well, he's actually a very big Irish bird, Mr. Darren Lynch of Irish Titan, and he said the following about you. He said, Rick is that rare combination of the highest of business acumen, the strongest of personal values, and the most genuine of care for helping entrepreneurs grow their businesses. Rick's made me a better person, both personally and professionally. Sláinte to Rick, and that means cheers or to your health for the non-Celtics watching. So there you go. So let's get down to helping people really shortcut their path to success and learn about the man behind Club E. So I would say, Rick, that I believe that you have the most unique perspective of anyone. And I don't think that anyone else has this in our town simply because of your blend of experience. So if you can tell us a little bit about kind of your background and kind of where you got all this experience from.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Sharon, for doing this. I appreciate it. I appreciate the honor to do it, and also the kind of unique foresight on your part to want to turn the table. So thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
also thank you for reaching out to that little bird. Um, Darren and I have been actually business contacts and then evolved into the friendship, which I find it kind of an interesting way to do that. And so I appreciate and respect, and I'm grateful for Darren's comments. So thank you for doing
Oh,
all that.
you're so
Um,
welcome.
yeah, thanks. So I guess I probably would start just with longevity. Surviving 30 years in a volatile, complex, difficult industry, that being the capital markets, is not easy.
Yeah.
Things don't work out a lot of times, and careers can get blown up for deals not working or whatever. So probably start just having some longevity, and obviously with the gray hair, you can see to that. And you got a little closer look, you'd see the wrinkles and probably a few scars. All right, so but longevity by itself maybe isn't totally unique. So I guess if it'd say, well, what's unique about the background?
Yeah.
First of all, I started doing investment research. So the skill set that I learned was how to analyze companies and tell people what stocks to buy or sell.
And how did you fall into that?
So very good question. So originally, I thought I wanted to either be a dentist like my father or a doctor. I spent 3 years of studying science and math. We can get into it at a later date, but got turned off a little bit when insurance appeared to be dominating the industry. I knew a little bit with some friends of my parents that were in the stock market. It sounded interesting to me. I liked the competitiveness, the winning, the losing, the daily grind, if you will, of trying to figure out what's going to work, what's going to not.
Yeah.
And then I got a job as a undergrad working for two stockbrokers, switched majors, studied business, crammed a couple of years of business into a short period of time. And those stockbrokers taught me about the stock market. And I got an investment research job right out of school at a small brokerage firm in town called Langler Budd that's no longer around. But it was a good place to start. And then the last name I would throw out there is I somehow had the honor or the pleasure of having Gary Smaby take me under his wing. And Gary launched me into a whole bunch of other things. And so it was the job as an undergrad, leading into the first job after college, leading into the mentorship from Gary Smaby that sprung my research career. So analyzing companies was like the first thing that I learned to do
Yeah.
through Gary. And after I worked with him for a period of time, he introduced me to Piper Jaffray, and I went into their investment banking department, and I learned about raising money, selling companies, doing venture deals and private equity deals. So just the understanding of the capital markets, what would sell, what wouldn't sell, and an understanding of how to raise money, package companies so that they could raise money. So doing investment banking was kind of the second thing I did.
Yeah.
And one of our clients at Piper was what was then known as Norwest Venture Capital. And they hired me, and I went to Norwest Venture Capital. At that moment in time, they had both venture and private equity under the same roof. Back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of firms did it that way. They have since split into two groups. Norwest Venture Partners went to Silicon Valley. Norwest Equity Partners stayed here in Minneapolis. And so I started doing venture capital, which kind of combined it all, because you had to analyze companies, you had to understand the capital markets, and then you had to grow companies.
Yeah.
And so I think those three things, the investment research, investment banking, and venture capital tied together, is part of what makes my background unique. And then the last thing, going back to the beginning, if I've been doing it now, like I said, for 30 years, 30 plus years, and Malcolm Gladwell's comment about needing 10,000 hours to be a domain expert. Over the 30 plus years, by my math, I've done over 10,000 deals, not 10,000 hours. And so I feel like a producer in Hollywood that have seen all the movie scripts. There's only so many ways you can write a script. And so I feel like I've seen a lot of them, know what works, what doesn't work, what's going to sell, what's not going to sell. And so I think those experiences, plus longevity, ties it together to make it kind of a unique background.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I know that in the Twin Cities, kind of having you present in a deal, whether it's as an advisor, a board member, or an investor, is a real plus. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, thank you.
It's the
Again,
truth.
thank you again. So I appreciate that. Well, I think at a high level, it signals to investors that at least some of the right ingredients are present in that company for that company to be successful.
Okay.
So that by itself, while important, probably isn't the only thing. From there, I'd like to believe that I can bring some valuable ingredients to a company, whether it's tweaking something from a strategic standpoint, whether it's introducing new people to the equation, whether it is bringing other pieces of the puzzle that they might be missing and act as a catalyst for change. I believe that's an important part. And then last but not least, I think anyway, that having me involved would increase the chances of success. And so whether it's a small earlier stage deal or something that's further along, that have had years and years and years of track record, I believe whether it be, again, the strategic insights or the people or ideas that I bring to the table for change, that I increase the chances of those companies' success.
Is it hard to give people honest feedback up front about their wonderful ideas that have been their babies?
Absolutely. Very good question. It's a little bit like seeing pictures from somebody's kids or their grandkids, and isn't this kid the cutest thing ever? Or pictures of their pets, and this the cutest picture of a dog or cat or whatever ever. It is a little dicey, yes, and it's not easy. I do know that going back to my Sherpa partner days, one of the things that we wanted to do was always tell the entrepreneurs and business owners three things that we liked about their company and three things that we thought they could improve upon,
Oh,
so that
interesting.
we were giving them both positive feedback as well as some constructive criticism. Because if all you do is bang, 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 here's all the things that are wrong, frankly, that's disheartening and long term doesn't add to their journey. And I'd like to think that part of my job, in addition to working with companies, are to be supportive of the folks that I end up maybe not working with. And so if all you do is beat people up, that's not particularly valuable. So try to provide a balanced view of what's going on. And you touched on it a little earlier with my personality and background, that the connector part of it. I always try to steer people towards somebody that I think they could benefit from meeting. And it may not just be about their raising the capital. It might be a potential employee or partner, or it might be somebody who's had a similar life experience or something. So I always try to steer them towards somebody that could be additive to their journey.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we're doing today is we are inviting the audience to send in questions on the YouTube chat. And we did actually receive a couple before we even went live. So I think this is the perfect time to ask a question from Carmen, which is kind of related to this, is that I've heard conflicting things about qualifying ideas, partners, and projects. How do you think about investing your time, money, and reputation in an effort to grow influence, pay yourself, and make a difference?
Very good question, and thank you, Carmen, for your participation. Carmen, like as we started with Darren, and like you, Sharon, I would consider both a business contact and a friend, which actually
Oh,
says something about me. I tend to do business with the people that I consider friends, and vice versa. So, thank you, Carmen, for your participation today, and encourage other folks to submit questions as well. So I guess as I look at her question and think about it, there's probably three different parts. How do you qualify an idea?
yeah.
So there's probably a lot of different things out there that somebody could look at, but first and foremost, start with the people. What is their background? How they have unique perspectives into doing whatever it is they're trying to do, and how do those unique perspectives and experience increase their chances of success? So I'd start with the people. Secondly, let's start with the product or service. What's unique about that? Is there something special, whether it be intellectual property or being first to market or whatever? And then the other quick thing would be just market size. I think in Minnesota, sometimes people get a little too conservative with their view of the world and maybe don't aim towards something significant.
Mm,
And I guess my thought process is if you aim high and you don't quite get there, you're still going to achieve something good, even if you get a second place trophy.
mm-hmm.
And so market size would be something third. And I guess we could do a whole session on assessing things. But the fourth one, which I would add, which would be deal structure and valuation.
Mm,
Sharon and I talked about this before we started today. Sharon often leans towards being a value investor, as
yeah.
am I. And a lot of people bring their ideas forward with a structure and valuation, frankly, that is just out of the realm of possibility. And they're kind of DOA, dead on arrival, because they just haven't gone to market with a good idea
Yeah.
or haven't priced it appropriately. Second thing Carmen brought up, which I think is very insightful, is investors do invest money, but they're also, more importantly, investing time and reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Money, to some degree, is a commodity, can be recovered, can be raised, etc. But time is infinite for, or a finite amount for all of
Yeah.
us. And so time is a very valuable commodity, and reputation, you do something wrong, you may never be able to recover from that, especially if it's unethical or doesn't look right or smell right or whatever. And so, Carmen, investors need to be very careful, because it's not just their money, it is their time and reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And actually tying it into myself, I've turned down a lot of things because while I thought I could make money, it wasn't somebody or something I wanted to be attached to. And I've
Yeah.
always valued my reputation, and surviving as long as I have with a good reputation, I think says something, and I feel proud about that.
Yeah.
Lastly, Carmen's question was about paying yourself, making a difference, and having an influence. And I think as a triangle, those are great ways to look at it. So there has to be some economics, assuming that it's not just a mentorship relationship or whatever.
Yeah.
And those economics can be different from company to company. So that fits into it, but it isn't the only thing. Influencing a deal is part of why I like working with early stage companies. To me, it would be more fun to get a company up and running. Centera is a portfolio company of mine. They now have had a lot of success, have raised a lot of money, and are employing a lot of people, and that's fun
Yeah.
to see. And so, influencing and making a difference with companies is valuable. And then I think at the end of the day, just the one-on-one personal thing, having a difference with somebody and helping them achieve personal success with their
Yeah.
journey, as well as hopefully employ a lot of other people, which then cascades off into their family.
Yeah. And what do you think is different about this industry now compared to when you started kind of 30 plus years ago?
Sure. Well, when I was, first at Piper, investment banking was a 30-person department.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many hundreds of people are in investment banking at Piper now, but much different industry investment banking. In terms of venture capital and private equity, it was really a cottage industry back
Oh,
then.
really?
And so Norwest was considered a mega firm, relatively speaking, and they had a couple hundred million under management. So comparatively much smaller today. And back then there were only 7, 8, 9 deal people. And so it was a much smaller industry. What has
Mm-hmm.
transpired in the last 30 years, both for investment banking and venture capital and private equity, is the institutionalization of the industry. So it's no longer a mom and pop cottage industry. There's scale. There's a lot more zeros after what's going on, and it's a much bigger and more efficient market.
Yeah.
Capital markets have changed a lot, and I'm sure you see some of this, Sharon, in your world.
Oh, definitely.
The trading. It's hard for investment firms to get paid for trading like they used to. So that means profitability in that area is down. The
Yeah.
importance of investment banking, therefore, has gone up. It's a way for firms to make money. You've seen a digitization of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Investment industry kind of used to be quiet. And then now, because of that digitization and the competitiveness of the industry, they've had to basically market like everybody else.
Yeah.
And so that's something that has definitely changed. And then I suppose investors, because of, in particular, more recently, social media, but even before that, just with the digitization of everything and the internet, investors have become a little bit like media stars.
Hmm.
And so the individual investors have created their own brands, as opposed to 30 years ago, it was more about the firm
Yeah.
and how important that firm was, or the name of the firm. And now it's a little bit more about the individual. Not to say that the firm isn't important,
Mm-hmm.
but investors have become a little bit like media stars.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. And then, so my question was around sort of what it was like now relative to before, but we had another brilliant question from another audience member, Graham, that wants to know how the pandemic has impacted kind of new products, services, and timing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, the pandemic has been a tragedy for many folks. So my heart goes out to anybody who has lost a friend or family member, for anybody whose family has been touched by COVID, as well as any business. And unfortunately, the ripples of the pandemic will go through our society and across the globe for many years to come. And it's not just about the illness side topic, and sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. And I think in some respects we've seen some of that here. Graham, I appreciate you participating and being supportive of Club E. So thank you very much for your question. I think with a product or service, I guess one question would be: is it brand new, or is it a company coming out with something additive to their portfolio? Let's just, for today's conversation, blend them both together. I think that if you look at what's going on, a couple of things. Number one, you have to figure out how to meet people where they're at now, and that's at home, right? So however you market to a consumer and or a B2B customer, it's going to be a little different today, because you're not going to be able to go to a trade show, or you're not going to be able to see them in person or whatever. So I think you need to meet them where they're at. I also think you need to meet them where they're at as it relates to their life journey and what's going on and how do you fit within that. You might be tone deaf pushing a certain kind of product or service now versus something else that maybe adds a little bit more utility or a little bit more function So I think you need to be a little careful with that. In terms of how the pandemic have impacted businesses, one of the things that you might do, Graham, or advise your clients is, what does your own personal supply chain look like? And to make sure that you're covered there. You also might look at your own management team, and do you have a single point of failure on your management team? So if somebody had something go bad with them or somebody in their family, so you kind of have to maybe be a little bit more cautious about what the back office side of your business looks like, as well as what your team looks like. I also think that you want to be careful about customer concentration, because right now, if you put all your eggs in a basket relative to a particular product or service, you have high customer concentration. That is not good in an environment like we're at. And then last but not least, and I think we might get into this a little bit more about characteristics of entrepreneurs, I think you want to look at things to the best of your ability from kind of a Zen point of view, meaning there's a lot of stuff you can't control, and to try to let go of things you can't control and focus on the things you can, the internal activities of your business, as well as your own mindset. I saw a lot of entrepreneurs get very white knuckled around their businesses about a year ago, and in some respects for good reason. But the folks that could be a little bit more at ease, a little bit more laid back, a little bit more Zen-like, allowed them to maybe problem solve a little easier or be a little more open-minded to their problems. And so hopefully, Graham, that covered a little bit of what you might have been looking for, and happy to talk to you offline if you'd like.
Yeah, and I also imagine that, again, because we're doing everything from Zoom, it's opening up new markets, new investors, new audiences. Because I know from my firm is that, again, we see ourselves as a kind of a local, although we take care of people nationally. But if somebody doesn't have to be in your same city, it really can change the rules of the game very quickly. So I imagine that there's a lot of opportunity around that.
Yes, Zoom clearly has changed the game. One of my portfolio companies, who ironically took in some private equity money during the pandemic, was always a virtual company from day one. And so we've been doing Zoom for them for 5-6 years. And so it was really somewhat of a non-event for that company. But yeah, Zoom has created a whole nother path to customers, but then that also has created other kinds of things, like how do you do a Zoom meeting and make that sort of engagement that you otherwise would have done in person. So you've had to hone different skills, come up with different ideas. Absolutely, it has created new channels. Instead of being just local, go national, but also, frankly, how you can conduct your business and where you can conduct it from. I know that you've been down in Florida for a while, Sharon, but other people might have been used to just doing, one location. And so Zoom allows people to expand their geographic footprint with their customers, as well as how they might organize their own teams.
I always think the most fun thing is you get to look in people's homes and their art and what's important to them. And can you tell us about the relevance of the art piece behind you?
Actually, that's a very good question, and not everybody has noticed that. In fact, nobody's ever asked. So thank you.
I always like to have a good look.
Actually, so this is a tree. And obviously, Portraits of Growth. It's a PricewaterhouseCoopers Money Tree Survey, which is a venture capital survey. Cool. And I have this from back in the day when we were doing investments from Sherpa Partners. And so the Sherpa investments were part of their survey. So I was getting the money tree there. So it's a good reminder of me to focus on growing and building things and hopefully having some success.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So let's turn now our attention to some of the traits of successful entrepreneurs. So what do you think at a high level makes a really good entrepreneur?
I think we touched on a couple things, probably on purpose. It was Graham's question about the pandemic. But I think first and foremost, nothing ever works like how you think it's going to work. So I would start with problem solving. And you have a plan, and the plan might have taken years of incubation to come up with, and it looks good and it's 50 pages long, and there's charts and all these what ifs and all this stuff. And then day one, the world throws a pandemic at you and everything's out the window and you have to adapt. So let's start with problem solving. Second thing is within that, being open-minded to what the solutions might look like. If you're used to just looking kind of in a sandbox perspective, you're not going to be open-minded to possible solutions that are out of the box and maybe not the norm. And so there's problem solving as a component, and then being open-minded to solutions. Third thing would be there's so much ambiguity that you never can fully solve for that. So that means you have to accept and embrace and be comfortable living in a state of the unknown. And I think it's human nature to try to solve for all these different things, and the reality is you can't. And so just to get comfortable with the fact of, hey, I'm not going to know that, or I can't solve that problem. So I'm just going to live in this space and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That leads into having, frankly, the word I would use is grit. So whether you call it perseverance or grit, you need to stomach a lot of stuff going on that isn't what you planned for. It's not working how you want it to work. And you just need to grind it out. One of my sons played basketball at De La Salle. And one of the things that coaches there always did was, or always said was grinders win. And that was their big hashtag, grinders win. So sometimes you just have to gut it out. And so while you can be accepting of this ambiguity, you just also have to put your nose down and grind through it. And then last but not least, I alluded to it earlier, which would be focusing on what you can control and letting go of the rest. I often, to myself, say the Serenity Prayer. And if anybody out there doesn't know it, I would say to look it up, because it will be valuable to you both in your personal life as well as your work life. But focusing on what you can control, let going of the rest, and trusting that the grit and the problem solving ability that you bring to the table are going to be enough to get you to the finish line.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And now Douglas asks a very practical question. He wants to know whether you need a full business plan in order to reach out to you. What's the typical thing that you see when people approach you, usually in the Minneapolis Club at lunch?
Yeah, sure.
So
yes, exactly. And actually, Sharon, I have to say, my dad was a dentist for many years, and we never went anywhere without somebody saying hello to him, coming up, giving him a hug or whatever. And every once in a while, my mother would be put off by it because you were sitting down trying to have a dinner and people would come over or whatever. So I grew up with that. So I am comfortable with people approaching me, whether it be at the Minneapolis Club or wherever. So anybody out there, feel free. If you see me, come on up, say hello, tell me about what you're up to. Or if you reach out electronically, I don't think, for me anyway, you need a full business plan. I know there's people that want that. I don't need that. Been doing it enough time. And we talked about the 10,000 deals earlier. We can have a 5-minute conversation. You got enough in your head to explain the situation, Douglas. I'll ask some questions based on my experiences, and we'll get to the finish line. And like I said, hopefully have a couple of things that you might work to improve. Hopefully have somebody to steer you towards that might better yourself or your journey. And then if there's something else that I can specifically do to add value, whether I'm involved or not, I certainly would do that. So to answer your question, Douglas, no, you don't have to have a full plan. I think that helps, but don't let it stop you. If you're looking for a template, look for Guy Kawasaki's 10-20-30 format. Again, Guy Kawasaki 10-20-30 format. The other one that's real good is there's a group called SlideBean, and they market their original improvement of the Airbnb deck. And so you can see the original Airbnb deck and how SlideBean improved it. So just Google SlideBean and Airbnb. Those are two fabulous templates. If you use those two and come anywhere near those, you'll be well served. But if not, feel free to reach out and we'll get to the finish line.
Oh, well, one of the other questions I wanted to ask, which is a little bit off topic, but I think it's important to me that people get to know you and who you are. You're always the one interviewing everybody, introducing everything, sort of leading the panels. So if you couldn't do this line of work, so if I said you're absolutely banned from doing this kind of work going forward, what would your fantasy job be instead?
Very good question. So, one of my very vivid memories as a child was my mother took me to see Elvis Presley. And I did not, I certainly knew who he was, and we played his music at the house, but I had no idea of the persona or the whole rock star thing. And I was mesmerized by his performance and the enthusiasm of the mostly female audience. Um, and some other day, we'll talk about the stories about the handkerchiefs and how people liked retrieving those anyhow,
Yeah.
or the other items that were thrown up at Elvis. Anyway, so that concert left a strong impression. It was a very fun memory
Oh.
of doing something with my mother. So if I could do anything, I probably would put rock star musician at the front of the line. However, I don't have any musical or singing talent. So I guess if
Oh.
plan B was what would I do? Being a radio talk show host was something that was always kind of interesting to me. And actually, in college, somebody asked a question about, and I at the time wasn't out of school, so I wasn't in a career, but I was studying
Yeah.
business. And it's like, well, what would you do if you had the ability to do whatever? And so the concept of being behind a microphone, talking to people, sharing experiences and stories is something that I like doing. And so that probably would be something a little more practical than being a rock star musician. However, want to say that I love what I do. I hope I don't get banned, because if I do, that means I did
Oh.
something unethical, illegal, and probably would go to jail. But
Yeah.
don't want to do that. So I don't plan on changing jobs. I don't plan on
Yeah.
retiring. I get energized by working with smart, creative, hardworking people doing interesting and intellectually stimulating things. That's
Oh.
why I like interacting and being friends with people like you, Sharon, people like Darren Lynch, people like Graham and Carmen and Douglas. And so I love all of you. I love my Club E community. It brings me a lot of joy,
Oh.
and it's very satisfying. And so I consider it a blessing to have this opportunity and to be here with all of you.
Oh, well, I have another question. And for this one, I think I'm just going to ask you to touch on it just very lightly, because I think that we will touch on this
Yep.
in a future talk. But from Joe, he asked what the biggest mistake first-time founders make. So if you have like one or two ideas on that.
Sure. So, Joe, thanks for your participation. I know you've been supportive of Club V as well. So, thank you for that. And maybe that might even be a topic for a whole show by itself,
Yeah.
biggest mistakes by first time founders. Um, I guess if I had to come up with a couple, and I won't get too long because I know we're getting a little long here, Sharon.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say would be careful about who you partner with. So being partners with somebody or co-founders with somebody is very difficult.
Hmm.
Not trying to be funny, but it's like having a significant other or a marital relationship. And I know this is a
Yeah.
family-friendly show, but there's no sex to add to the mix, and so people can get pretty sick of each other, and there's not a lot of easy ways to smooth things over. So be careful about who
Yeah.
you partner and do business with, number one. Number two, be careful about how much infrastructure you build and how much money you spend, because if you get quote unquote ahead of yourself or
Right.
over your skis too far, you can just create trouble for yourself trying to fund this beast that you've built that maybe is overbuilt and building it up too soon. So infrastructure probably would be number two. And then third, I would say, is really narrowing the focus of your product or service and trying to get some paying customers as soon as you can, because that validates what you're doing. And a
Yeah.
lot of times people try to do too much, try to provide too broad of a solution, you end up proverbially trying to boil the ocean. You end up not doing anything right. And so having a tight focus, at least on the front end, to establish what you're doing, because oftentimes being early and being wrong look exactly the same. And
Yeah.
so getting that validation with a paying customer, however you do it and however narrow you might have to be on the front end, would be valuable. So those would be a couple. I think we are going to talk about that in
Yeah.
the future, and
Yes,
probably
we
could have
are.
a whole show on that.
Yeah. And so if you had just one key takeaway to the audience about this topic today to kind of put everything perfectly in a bow as we depart for today, what do you think that would be?
Good question. And I probably have a lot of different thoughts bouncing around. I think the question that we touched on about the traits of a successful entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
being open minded to the solutions available to you, which might not fit into a nice box, um, accepting that things aren't going to be perfect and you can only control so many things,
Yeah.
having the grit to put your nose down and work through some challenging things, and then ultimately letting go of the stuff you need to let go of, and having that process that you go through, because every day is going to have its challenges and things don't come easy, and it's going to take longer than you think, and it's going to be harder than you think, and
Yeah.
getting up with energy and passion each day is not easy. And so finding something that you truly believe in your heart, that will sustain you when times are tough, and then following that process of just working through it, accepting things, and letting go of what you can't control, will keep
Oh,
you each and every day getting up, aiming towards what you need to aim for, keeping your eye on the horizon, as they say, and your eye on the prize, as my kids always said in their schoolwork. So
oh.
anyway, that would be how I would tie today's session up.
Well, I can't thank you enough for letting me turn the tables on you. And I know that when we talked about this, it really cascaded into sort of a couple of other interviews as well, because the topic is just so deep. I know that we'll talk about sort of entrepreneurial failures in the future as well. But again, I can't thank you enough for being game to being put on the hot seat. I hope I wasn't too hard on you.
No, it went smoothly, as I knew it would. So thank you for doing
No,
that,
you're
and
so
thank you for
welcome.
putting the time into making it work. And thank you for your openness to doing it. And then I guess last but not least, I have to play the host. Can't fully let go of that job, Sharon. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, remind everybody how they can get a hold of you to learn more about you and that interesting background of yours, and or what you do at White Oaks.
Yep, they can just go to my email is sharon@whiteoakswealth.com, or you can go to our website, whiteoakswealth.com, to learn more about us. But thank you so much, Rick, for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you very much. And I look forward to our next session.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.